caffeined up, and I wake up already with a level of energy that is, it's. I wake up and people think that I'm already had coffee. That's how I wake up. So I had coffee. So be warned here. Before we start, I wanted to let you guys know a little bit about the events that are coming up. We've got the youth rally at Porterville Church of Christ coming up at the end of February. So that's going to be February 29th. And so if you guys know anyone who wants to attend or anything, just let me know. There's a $10 entrance fee. And we have a great time. We do games, we do lunch, a whole bunch of lessons. I'll be preaching there, and then Greg Houston will be preaching there as well. So it'll be a great time of fellowship and learning, and it's all going to be centered around becoming men and women of God and being apart from the world. So it's looking to be a really good event. Then the second event is going to be YBC camp. And I know this is way early. You guys are like, wow, we're in January, or we're talking about camp already. But so that's going to be the third or fourth week in July. And the reason I'm mentioning it so early, I'm going to be co-directing it this year, and we're trying to get everything all put in place. And we've got a couple spots for help in the kitchen and help in Snack Shack and help with counseling and different things there. So if you guys, let me tell you, it is an awesome week. Like, I do counseling and I teach one of the classes, and this year directing, so we'll see how that goes. But it's a spectacular week because you get to see the kids and they, where they start from where they end. And they start out, you can see the world on them, and by the end, you can see God in them. It's spectacular. It is the best week of the year. So if you guys want to be a part of that, let me know, because we can use help, and it's just an awesome way to serve and an awesome way to be an impact in the kids' lives. So let me know. That will be the third or fourth week of July. Should have brought up some water here with all the coffee I've got. All right, so today's lesson is salty fisherman. Salty fisherman. You guys have heard of a salty sea dog sailor? I don't know. It was kind of a spoof off of it, because Jesus says to be the salt of the earth and that he's going to make us fishers of men. So salty fisherman, I don't know. That's what I came up with. I thought it was clever. I laughed to myself. So we'll just go with it. But I want to start out with a story here. So there was this man in Alaska, and he worked for the oil fields up there. And he was a Christian. And there was a traveling preacher who came through, and he was preaching at that church one Sunday. And he talked to the man who worked in the oil fields, and he says, well, how do you do it? How do you work up there? I've heard that everyone up there is always cussing. They're very, hostile towards Christians. They're very, they do a lot of drinking and they do all this stuff. And how do you coexist with that? And the man said, I just don't tell them I'm a Christian. And I heard this story, and that's not where I thought it was going. That's that's the end. That just just don't tell them. Just act like them. When I'm in the world, do as the world does, right? But that's not how we're called to live. That's not how we're called to be. That's not how we shouldn't be okay with that. We shouldn't be okay with not having people know that we're Christians, not shining our light into the world, not being separate. If somebody looks at you and can't tell that you're a Christian, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. I want it to be in every action that I do. I want it to be in every word that I say. I want everything that I do, that every word from my mouth is praising God, that is showing that I am a Christian, that I belong to him. So I want to give kind of a couple reasons why we should share our faith and kind of go into detail on some of those, and then a couple fears that we may have that would hinder us or stop us from sharing our faith. So the first reason I have here is why we should share is the obvious one, because Jesus commanded it. Because Jesus commanded it. And that right there, just this one reason, should be enough reason for us to be out there. Should be enough reason for us to be living it. Not just living it, but talking about it. You know, I grew up with the mentality, I don't really have to talk to anyone about my faith. They can just see it in my actions. Right? And sure, that sounds good, you know? That is good, that people see that your actions are different. But it's not just about the actions, it's about the words. It's a proclamation through actions and a proclamation through a proclamation. You know? That it's not just, you know, we do small things over here and you know, it's also about actually speaking out and telling people about Christ. So I want to take a look here, and this was Jesus' command. These were his last words. Now, in your last words, you want to impart important things. You want to impart wisdom to the people who you're talking to. If I was saying my last words, I would want them to be important. I would want them to be something that I want to impart to people, something that, you know, whether it's something that I want them to do or something that I want them to remember or something like that. It's important, the last words. But here were Jesus' last words before he ascended to heaven. Here's what he said. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority has been on heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So Jesus' final remarks, the final thing that Jesus said, the last thing he said before he went up to heaven to be with God, the last little bit of wisdom that he wanted to impart to the disciples, the last thing that he wanted them to do was to share the word, to actively share it. Not just to do some actions that made them look like they were good people or that they knew Jesus, but to share it, to actively go, not just even to share, but to make disciples, making disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. You know, you're going to make an impact and you're going to be an ambassador of Christ by your actions. But if you're not sharing Christ, if you're not making, you can't make a disciple with actions in that way. There also has to be talking and telling them about Christ. You know, I can help a little old lady across the street and show Christ in that way, but I'm not going to make a disciple of her just by walking her across the street because she still doesn't know. I haven't told her. My actions reinforce and my actions do make a difference, but not just actions alone, and I have to take that step of sharing my faith with her. So the other thing that Jesus imparted here, which was awesome in his last words, he said, teach them to obey everything I have commanded you. So share it and share with them the ability to share it. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Already there's that feeling that you're not alone in this. When you're sharing your faith, when you're going out, when you're making disciples, it's not just you. It's not just you, but he's there with you. I'm with you to the very end of the age. The very end. I love that verse. It's so awesome. The other thing, when Jesus was on the Sermon on the Mount, he talked about the action part of it. and that's important too. He said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." So we're light, we're salt, we're sharing through our actions, but then we're sharing also through our words, through actually sharing the word. We're salt and light. You know, I kind of got off on this little rabbit hole of looking into the salt, because I thought that was kind of interesting. But on a line it said that the Roman soldiers actually used to be paid in salt. You know, it was very valuable. It was something that was very important. You know, it was something of high value. They used to call it salarium, which is where we get our word salary, you know, and what you get paid. So salarium was when salt was used as a currency. And it was very valuable. It was basically money in a way, you know. But here, you know, I think that the emphasis on the salt of the earth is the value of it, the value of it. But if the salt loses its saltiness, it loses its value. If we're no longer salty, just think about that, salty Christians. I don't know. I thought that was funny too, but you are the salt of the earth. We got to be salty. I want to be a salty Christian, you know, and a salty, you know, that kind of implies a term of, you know, gentle aggressiveness, you know, that it gently flavors food, you know, without the saltiness, it's kind of, not so great. And I also saw this online, but I couldn't find this in any books or anything, so I don't know if this is true. But they said that when they used to build stories on top of houses, they would mix salt in with the plaster. Like salt that, you know, was worthless, salt that they weren't going to use. They would mix it in with the plaster and plaster the floor with it to make it a bit thicker. And they said then that basically the salt was trampled upon. It was worthless salt, that it was just stepped on. And I don't know if that was true, but it was also kind of an interesting thing, just because Jesus said that it was going to be trampled underfoot. All right, let's move on. Past the salt. All right, so 2, why we should share our faith. Already, just because Jesus commanded it should be enough. But number 2, because we received grace from God. We received so much mercy and grace from him in our salvation that how could we not share it with others? How could we not? That's the big question in my mind is, how could we not impart what we have received? You know, I always like to say that God doesn't give us any selfish gifts. That every gift that God gives is a gift that's meant to be shared and meant to be passed on to others. You know, if God gives you a gift of encouragement, that's not so that you can encourage yourself. That's so that you can encourage others, so that you can share that with them. If God gives you the gift of hospitality, then you are to be hospitable. Not so you can make yourself very hospitable, you know, but so that you can be hospitable to others. Every single gift that we receive is not just for ourselves, but also to impart and to share. And I feel like our salvation is part of that. God has given us this grace and this mercy. We should also, in turn, share that. I wanted to pull up, and I know these verses here aren't in the context of salvation, but it was kind of interesting in Matthew 18 here. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And he began the settlement. A man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him." And this was the equivalent of 20 years' wages. 20 years. And I'm wondering here, how'd you accrue that much? But 20 years of work. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him. He canceled the debt, and he let him go. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. So they said about 100 days' work. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me, and I will pay it back." But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged, and they went and told their master everything that had happened. When the master called the servant in, he said, "You wicked servant," he said, "I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. Now, I know this is from the context of forgiveness and mercy, but I kind of want to say that it could be applicable to this, that God has shown us so much mercy in salvation, that we know the truth. How much more should we share that with others? That God has forgiven us so much of our debt. 20 years worth, 40 years worth, however much years worth of sin. For me, 23 years worth of sin so far and counting. And he forgave me that. How much more would I want the people who I care about, the people across the street from the church here, our neighbors, our friends who don't know Christ, to be forgiven of their sins? How much more, since I've received this gift, since I've had my debts forgiven, would I want someone else's debts forgiven? Would I want to show them how their debts can be forgiven? I think that is applicable in that sense. The third reason that I had here, which kind of ties in, is because of a love for others. We have to have that love for other people. That love for other people, it spurs us on to not want them to be lost in their sins. We don't want them to be lost. Imagine, say, if you had the cure for cancer, that I came up with the cure for cancer. And instead of giving that out, instead of sharing it with everyone, instead of making this available to the world, I kept it for myself. And I hid it away. And I didn't let anyone use it. I mean, what would you guys think of me? Pretty horrible dude, That would be horrible of me to have that life-saving cure and to keep it to myself. But because I love other people, because I care about them, because I don't want to see them suffer, I don't want to see them die, I would share that cure. It's the same with this. Our sin is a cancer. Our sin is a disease. Our sin will kill us. Take a look here at Romans chapter 5. It says, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin. And in this way, death came to all people because all have sinned." Death is an incurable disease that will kill us spiritually. But he continues here, "To be sure, sin was in the world before the law was given, but sin was not charged against anyone's account where there was no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, who is a pattern of the one to come." Talking about Jesus. "But the gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man," so if sin came into the world through Adam, the one man's sin, "how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many. I love how it sounds so hopeless. Death is coming in through sin, through this one man's sin. Now all sin, and all have fallen short, and all but God. But God came in. But one man, Jesus Christ, and his sacrifice, they overflow to the many. Nor can the gift of God be compared with the result of one man's sin. The judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation, but the gift followed many trespasses and brought justification. For if by the trespass of the one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and of the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ? That should be something that we share. That should be something that we spread. Because through the one man, Jesus Christ, the only way, the one cure for sin, not of anything that we can do to cure it ourselves, but because of what he did to abolish it. Because he took our place. Consequently, just as the one trespass resulted in condemnation for all people, so also one righteous act, Jesus' death on the cross, resulted in justification and life for all people. For just as through the disobedience of the one man, the many were made sinners, so also through the obedience of the one man, the many will be made righteous. It's spectacular. We're made righteous. We have that ability to be made righteous through what he did. How can we not share it? Just as, if I had that cure for cancer, if I didn't share it, I would be, you guys would think, man, that Zach, he's got the cure for cancer, keeping it all to himself. But this is so much worse, because not only does sin kill, but it kills spiritually. It's a separation from God. How can we not share the good news of the gospel? All right. So talking about loving others here, I wanted to pull up John 13, because this was also Jesus' command. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. How much did Jesus love us? He loved us to death. He loved us to the cross. He loved us to save us. Love as I have loved you. That, to me, means that I want other people to know what Jesus did. He wants us to love as he loved, and he loved enough to save us. I want to love the people across the street here enough to tell them. I want to love my neighbors enough to tell them. I want to love the people that I meet enough to tell them the truth, what is going on, what Jesus did, what position they're in. Because that was the position I was in. I was in the position of a guilty sinner who's going to hell because of what I did. And there was no way for me to get out of it on my own. That's the position everyone is in. But God, but Jesus, but his sacrifice. Without that sacrifice, there's no hope. Without that acceptance, there's no hope. Without them knowing, without us telling them, they don't have hope. We have to be those vessels. We have to be sharing that gospel. We have to show love as Jesus loved us. All right, so now I wanted to address some of the, and these are some of the things that I've faced in my life of the fears that I have in sharing the gospel. Because there's 1,000,001 reasons. Let me tell you, I've come up with them all. There are 1,000,001 reasons why I shouldn't share, or why I can't share, or why they don't need it, or, there are 1,000,001 reasons, but I narrowed it down to 4, so we won't be here all night. But the first reason I have here is that we are afraid of rejection. I was like, well, What if they say no? What if they push it away? What if they don't like me anymore? What if they reject me? Let me tell you something. Jesus was rejected. Jesus was rejected. So if I'm thinking that I don't want to do it because I'll face rejection, man, Jesus would have had so much more reason to not do it because he was rejected. He was pushed away. But man, am I glad he did it. Let me show you an example here of when Jesus was rejected in Matthew chapter 8:34. Then the whole town, it's not like just one person came up and said, what you're saying stinks. The whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. The whole town of Exeter came up and said, Zach, please go. Please go. Can you imagine that? Please just get out of here. This is Jesus. And what did he do? He healed a person. This is Jesus, and they rejected him. They told him to leave. They pleaded with him. They begged him to just get out of here. Can you imagine that? This is Jesus. So if Jesus faced rejection and he overcame and he loved and kept going and kept going and kept going, how much more should we in the face of rejection? Number 2, sometimes we're afraid of messing up. Oh, I'm not going to have the right words to say. I'm going to mess it up. I'll probably scare them away from the church, if anything. I mean, have you seen this face? No. But let me tell you, Peter messed up. Jesus told Peter that he was going to deny him 3 times before the cock crows, and Peter's like, you're crazy, man. He says, no, I won't deny you. I've been with you all this time. I've never left your side. I'm not going to deny you. But when the time comes, Peter denies him 1 time. Peter denies him 2 times. Peter denies him 3 times. He denies Jesus. He denies that he even knows him. He utters a curse and says, I don't know him. Peter messed up royally, which is comforting to us because we can know that we can mess up. And still, Peter shared the gospel to 3,000 people on Pentecost. And 3,000 people were cut to the heart. And 3,000 people were baptized. And 3,000 people were made disciples. Crazy. We can mess up. We can say things that aren't perfect, and God can still use it. In 1 Peter chapter 3, it says, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. So we should study. We should gain more knowledge. We should be learning how to answer the questions that people have. But just because the thought that we may not have an answer shouldn't be a deterrent for us doing what's right. Just because we're not going to do it perfectly. There's only one person that's done it perfectly, and that's Jesus. So don't let that be a deterrent. Don't let that dissuade you from doing what God and Jesus have called us to do. Number 3 here, afraid of offending someone. Well, guess what? Jesus offended people. Jesus offended people. People are going to reject. People are going to get upset. People are going to be offended by the truth. But here's the thing, is if we're out to be like, we're right, you're wrong, you're going to hell, that's no. Even in this verse, when Peter says, when we're asked to give the reason of the hope that we have, do it with gentleness and respect. Do it with love, as Jesus loved us. So we can't be afraid of offending people by telling them the truth out of love. We have to still share that. We have to. In Mark chapter 6, this is crazy to me. I didn't even notice this word until I was reading here, but Jesus left there and went to his hometown accompanied by his disciples. This is his hometown where he was born and raised. Well, not born, but raised. Then the Sabbath came. He began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. "Where did this man get these things?" they asked. "What's this wisdom that has been given to him? What are these remarkable miracles he has been performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. They took offense at him. They took offense at Jesus and the words and the truth that he was sharing. They're like, "We've known this guy since he was a kid. We know his mom. We know his brothers. We know his sisters. Isn't he just the carpenter? How dare he tell us what to do?" They took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own home." Jesus faced offending people. He did. It offended people. It was his hometown even. And people were offended. Here, let me tell you what they were offended to the point of. This next point is we may be afraid of persecution. That's why we may not share the word. But here's the continuation of that story in Luke chapter 4. All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. These are the same people that were offended. They got up, drove him out to the town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off the cliff. I don't think, personally, that I've ever offended anyone so bad that they wanted to throw me off the cliff. I'm personally trying not to get to that point, but after this sermon, no promises. But they wanted to throw him off the cliff. But Jesus, here's what he did. He walked right through the crowd and went on his way. Did he go on his way to hide? Did he go on his way to retreat? Did he go on his way? No. He went on his way to the next town to preach, to do miracles, to heal. He went on the next town to do what was right again and again, after offense, after rejection, after persecution. He continued to go. That's what I want to call us to do. That he faced persecution to the point of death. He went to the cross for us. He went to the cross. He died for us. That's the point and the level of persecution that Jesus was willing to bear for us. How much more should we go through the persecution of someone calling us names, someone spitting on us, someone rejecting us for what is right? I want to encourage us to reach out, to share, to be a salty fisherman. To be salty and to be a fisher of men. That's what Jesus said to Peter and Andrew. He said, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Let's be fishers of men. Let's be a people who grow and share our faith. I didn't write this down, but we were just doing a study in Acts on Wednesday, and it says that the disciples and all the people who had been saved, they gathered together, they praised God together, they had everything in common, they shared together, and the Lord added to their number daily. He blessed them. They were out sharing the good news, and the Lord blessed them and added to their number. We should be like the early church in this matter. We should take the gospel, because how can we afford not to? How can we have this cure and not share it with the world? If you need to respond, please do so as we stand and sing our final song.